Welcome back to the page, Harry Potter fans. Here we are continuing on with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always by Dead Woodpecker. Chapter 13, Old Friends.
Chapter 13, Old Friends. Chapter text. The night bus slammed to a halt outside the small garden gate that led to the burrow. Harry, feeling slightly queasy, pulled his trunk out with him and breathed a sigh of relief. He waved a goodbye to Stan Shunpike and could not help but feel very thankful as the bus lurched forward with a jolt and accelerated to an impossible speed before disappearing, that he was no longer on it. Harry turned, grinning for the first time in what felt like months. Ron, Ginny, Merlin, I thought that summer with the Muggles would never end. And they were a sight for sore eyes, to be sure. Ron was even longer and lankier than when he had last seen him. Though when they were fully grown, the differences in their heights were not as significant. It still surprised Harry that he only came up to Ron's shoulders at this point in time. He found himself eagerly anticipating his growth spurt. And Ginny, she had grown even more beautiful, and he could not look away from her face and the sight of her long red hair falling down her back like a waterfall of fire. Ginny hugged him, and Ron clapped him on the back. "How was Egypt?" he asked them as they lifted the heavy trunk and made their way to the familiar, oddly shaped building. Despite that he carried 1/3 of what felt like a massive weight, he really ought to clean out his trunk every once in a while. His entire body seemed to relax a little. "It was great," Ron said enthusiastically. "We learned loads of cool stuff about the Egyptian wizards. They were a barmy lot, I tell you. We got some books, too, and Bill showed us around the pyramids, the parts they won't let Muggles or unauthorized wizards go into." Harry gaped at him. "Are you channeling Hermione?" he asked uncertainly. Ginny laughed. Ron realized that if he actually paid attention to stuff, he might find it interesting. She reached up and playfully tousled his hair. "I think our little Ronnikins is finally growing up." Ron looked sheepish. "How was your summer, Harry?" "Not bad," Harry said, shrugging. It had, in fact, been full of agonizing boredom, punctuated by sharp annoyance with Dudley, Uncle Vernon, and Aunt Petunia, and one bright flare of rage with Aunt Marge and her cruel comments about his parents. To be sure, Harry had a completely perspective this time around. The words hurt him less, and Harry had mastered deflecting Uncle Vernon's rage. But with this new distance, the outrage came from the fact that they would treat any child or young man the way they did him, with a balance of abuse and neglect. Still, he'd managed to control his temper, and he'd felt even more satisfied with the way Aunt Marge had flinched away from the look on his face than when he'd blown her up. "I almost blew up my aunt," he said, smiling slyly. One more word, and she'd have been flying like a balloon out the window, and the ministry would have had to come track her down and puncture her. Ginny and Ron laughed. "You should have done it, mate," he said, "and gotten pictures." "Yeah," Harry said. "I could have sold them to the Daily Prophet for when they wrote the article about it. Would have made a fortune." Ron shifted his grip on the trunk, and Harry jerked forward. "I can see the headline now," he said, affecting a serious manner, quite at odds with his smirk. "Harry Potter, savior of the wizarding world / future Dark Lord, blew up Aunt in frightening display of terrible power. All our dire suspicions about young Harry Potter, the 13-year-old madman with the power to enslave us all, have been realized today," Ginny said seriously. His cruel nature finally became evident when he performed harmful magic against a poor, innocent Muggle. Harry snorted. "This is just the first step in his grand scheme of Muggle domination," Ron continued. "We tremble to think of what may come next. If you sad fools who still reckon Harry Potter's all right still refuse to believe it, see the photos of said Muggle bloating. They were provided by Harry Potter himself. Although our future Dark Lord Master was unavailable for comment," Ginny said through giggles. A note was attached. All it said was, "She deserved it." They all said in unison, even Harry. By this time, they had abandoned their attempt to carry the trunk and were now laughing too hard to walk. As Harry succumbed to helpless laughter, he felt a bit of the tension that had built up over the summer ease a little. He remembered telling the twins once, after he had given them his Triwizard Tournament winnings, that the world needed laughter Harry most especially. The joke shop would have to wait for a bit, but this was just what he needed. And suddenly the laughter cut off abruptly, as though it had never been. Harry faltered and saw a slightly sick look on Ginny's face. "Hi, Mum," she said tentatively. Mrs. Weasley stood watching them from not 10 feet away. It was plain, by the look on her face, that she had heard everything and did not approve. Her lips were pursed. She didn't say anything. Harry's here." Ron pointed at Harry unnecessarily. The silence grew and swelled. "Your father," she said in a dangerously quiet voice. "Your father has spent his entire working life trying to help Muggles." "Mum, we were just having a laugh," Ginny said in a small voice. "I'm not," she snapped. "You have no idea what you just sounded like. You can't possibly know. You're too young. But I bore all my children in a time when the kind of Muggle baiting you were talking about was actually encouraged." "Mom," Ron looked incensed. Harry's aunt was really awful. "You need to buck up your ideas, young man," she said sternly. "You don't attack people just because you don't like them." He didn't even attack her. Mrs. Weasley closed her eyes. Harry thought that she might be counting to 10. When she opened them, she looked at Harry and tried to smile. "Harry, if you wouldn't mind, I need to speak with my children. Just leave your trunk here. I'll have Arthur levitate it up for you in a bit. You look a bit peaky, dear. You might want to have a bit of a lie down before dinner." Harry took this to mean that he was supposed to go up to Ron's room. He glanced back at Ron and Ginny once. They did not look happy. He didn't meet any of the Weasleys inside, although he heard the twins talking loudly and happily from the kitchen. He thought about joining them, but thought it best to obey Mrs. Weasley. He wished he had an extendable ear. Harry opened the door to Ron's room with more force than was strictly necessary, and was relieved to see that the camp bed was already set up. He threw himself down on it, wondering what the hell had just happened. Mrs. Weasley had never been quite this sensitive about a joke. The twins had been legendary for saying tactless things and mocking anything with 2 legs, including Voldemort. "Were you serious?" Harry wished that his godfather was available to talk to. Despite his growing uncertainty that Sirius would ever be able to forgive Harry for effectively causing a year and a half of unneeded time in Azkaban with the Dementors, Harry longed to talk to him. Sirius may not have any clue how to bolster Harry's image and make the wizarding world stop viewing him as a potential threat, but at least he'd have a laugh about it. But Dumbledore, who had promised to contact Harry when he found Sirius, Muggles or not, had been silent all summer. What if he had left Britain? What if he were somewhere in Australia, or Brazil, or Sri Lanka? He could be anywhere in the world, with no interest whatsoever in meeting his godson. But that just didn't fit with the Sirius Harry used to know. Ginny was right. Unless the ripple effect had completely changed Sirius' personality, something else was keeping him away. "Think I should send that letter to him, Hedwig?" Harry looked over at his owl, but she was sleeping with her head tucked under her wing. He'd written a letter to Sirius at the beginning of the summer holidays, but he had never sent it. It seemed like it was too late. He should have sent it the day of Pettigrew's trial, or when Sirius had been released. But the months had gone by, and Harry was honest enough to admit that he was a little afraid of what Sirius' reply might contain. As time passed, it seemed more and more likely that it would be a polite rejection. Harry awoke, not realizing that he had actually fallen asleep, when Ron crashed through the door and stumped and looking extremely frustrated. "That bad?" he asked groggily. Ron rumpled his hair. "I don't know what's gotten into her," he said. "I feel like I don't even know my own mum anymore." Harry stayed silent, guessing that Ron needed a moment to gather his thoughts. "It wasn't exactly bad," he said slowly, "but it wasn't exactly good either." "Meaning?" "Well," he said, "she thinks that me and Ginny need to be careful what we say around you." "Not," he said when he saw the look on Harry's face, "because you're a danger, but because you're our friend. Mum says it's our duty to help you." Harry said. "You know," Ron looked even more annoyed. "To choose the right side, as if you didn't make that choice 20 years ago. She said that your experiences with the Muggles might have made you bitter. We can't blame them for what they don't know," Harry said reluctantly. In the small, dark corner of his soul, he did. But only a tiny bit. "Wish we could tell them," Ron sighed. "Yeah," Harry agreed. "But Dumbledore had it right. We gotta wait until they've chosen to fight. Bugger free will," Ron said sourly. I'm worried about Sirius, Harry said, steering the conversation away. It did no good to dwell on things they could not change. I wrote him a letter, you know. He didn't reply. Ron gaped at him. No, I never sent it, Harry explained. I thought it was too late. What do you reckon? I don't know. Harry, Ron said helplessly. He paused for a long moment. Dad's out in the shed. He got back from work while Mom was still lecturing us. You could talk to him. It was a tradition begun long ago in the distant future. When Harry found himself in the need of advice, he would find Arthur Weasley in his shed, at the Burrow, at Grimmauld Place, or at Molly's Auntie Muriel's. He would seek him out with the pretext of bringing him a snack. Molly always seemed to know when Harry needed to talk to the older man, and he would leave feeling more relaxed. Harry carried the heavy tray that Molly had pushed toward him out to the small shed in Auntie Muriel's backyard. He did not want to use magic to levitate it. The physical weight somehow balanced out the figurative weight that rested on Harry's shoulders. He was not thinking about Voldemort, for once, but he was replaying the events that had happened a week ago at Spinner's End. Arthur, predictably, was enchanting some muggle contraption. Harry looked closer and saw that it was a coffee maker, and wondered what possible magical function it could have. The older, wiser wizard was fiddling with it, though he did not seem particularly attentive. Harry suspected that he had come out here knowing that Harry would need to seek him out. The Weasleys, despite being in hiding, were still very much a part of the Order of the Phoenix, and everyone knew about Pettigrew's death. Harry said, I brought out some snacks. Molly thought you might want some. Arthur smiled. Thank you, Harry. Care to join me? She's made quite a lot. Harry took a bite of a bacon sandwich and then put it aside. Arthur, the other man, waited patiently, chewing absent-mindedly, eyes on Harry. I killed Wormtail, Harry said. I did it on purpose. I've killed before, but this time I planned it. It wasn't. I've only ever done it to defend other people. Arthur chewed thoughtfully and swallowed. I think you did do it to defend other people, Harry. Harry thought so too, but doubt still lingered. He killed Dean Thomas after his wand was taken away, and he killed Daphne Greengrass because she dared try to hide him. Neither of them was given a chance to fight back, Astoria told me. He betrayed my parents. He slaughtered Merlin knows how many muggles, and he tortured McGonagall into insanity. And it is certain that he would have killed more, Arthur pointed out. But still, Harry said, did he deserve? Harry, he interrupted, it isn't about whether anyone deserves to die. It's far more complex than that. If we had had this discussion even 10 years ago, I think my answer would have been different. But this war has changed a great many people, me included. If you know who was not trying to stomp out all the light in this world, I would be the second to say that killing is never the answer. And you would be the first. You don't think this war is tainting us? No, Arthur said firmly. When we have to kill, we do it to protect. We don't have another choice, at least not one that is acceptable. Azkaban is a mockery of a prison. We haven't been able to hold a Death Eater there for years. We don't have nearly enough people to watch over another secure location. Unless we want to keep disabling them for a time before they fight, torture, and kill again and again, killing is necessary. I've watched you grow up, Harry, and I know you as well as I know the sons of my flesh, Arthur continued. There is a huge difference between killing and murder. You know where that line in the sand is drawn better than almost anyone I've ever met. It isn't in you to murder, Harry. It'll never sit easy, Harry admitted, even when I have to kill you-know-who. Exactly, Arthur said. Do you think he'll be okay with it? Harry asked. Me talking to him? He doesn't know me very well. Ron shrugged. So let him get to know you. I think it'll help. Harry sighed. It shouldn't be this difficult for him to go and have a talk with Ron's father. It used to feel almost as natural as listening to Dumbledore and asking Hermione a question about a complicated spell. Despite the pretense of bringing him out snacks, Harry had always known that Arthur Weasley was willing to listen. All right, Harry said. I suppose you're right. And without letting himself change his mind, he jumped off the cot and left the hideaway that was Ron's room. He thundered down the stairs, pausing only when he met Ginny on the landing. Where are you going? She asked. Then, in a lower voice, did Ron tell you? He nodded. I'm going to the shed, to talk about Sirius. She smiled. Good idea. Did you think of it all by yourself? Cheeky girl, he grinned. And no, Ron suggested it. Don't let me stop you then, she said. Harry continued on down to the kitchen. He saw it as a positive sign that Mrs. Weasley was preparing a tray, obviously meant for her husband. He watched her for a moment, bustling around the kitchen. Molly Weasley was still the warm, maternal figure that he had always known. She may not yet think of him as good as one of her own sons, but he vowed that she would someday. Whatever it took. Mrs. Weasley? Harry said tentatively. She turned and smiled at him, and it was a lot warmer a smile than the cursory one she had given a few hours ago. Hello, Harry dear. Did you have a nice rest? I did, he admitted. Is that food? It's for Arthur, she explained. He's in his shed, working on something, even after a long day at work. If you're hungry, I can make more after I take this out to him. I can take it out to him, Harry offered quickly. When she hesitated, he added, Please. That hungry? She asked ruefully. I shouldn't be surprised, with 6 sons. And you do look a bit skinny, dear. Thanks, Harry said, relieved. And thank you, for letting me stay here before we all go to Diagon Alley. You're welcome, Harry, she smiled. It took her another minute to finish preparing Arthur's snack, and soon Harry was maneuvering through the burrow and out the back door. He walked across the slightly overgrown backyard and smiled to watch how the gnomes scattered and disappeared into their holes. He balanced the tray on one hand and knocked on the door, pushing it open at Arthur's come in. He was puttering with a can opener, open delight on his face. He had a quill behind one ear and his wand behind the other. Scraps of parchment flew in the breeze, created by the open doorway. Harry cleared his throat, and Mr. Weasley looked up, startled. Air, Harry said. Mrs. Weasley, she thought you might be hungry. Ah, he said. She knows me well. Here. He used his wand to clear a space off the crowded table. Harry put it down. There was a long, awkward silence as Mr. Weasley stared at him expectantly. Harry felt the back of his neck flush. Air, Harry said. That looks like a lot of food. Want some help? Harry looked at him straight in the eyes and willed the other man to know that he wanted advice, that he needed to talk to someone. There was a moment of perfect clarity when he saw that Mr. Weasley realized what he was asking. And then, I'm sure Molly is making snacks for all of you right now, he said pleasantly. But you can take a sandwich to tide you over. It's a long walk back to the kitchen for a hungry young man. It was kindly, gently done. Arthur Weasley had never been a cruel man, and he never would be. But it was a clear dismissal, and Harry felt a strange sensation that started somewhere in the vicinity of his stomach, traveled to his heart, slid up his throat, and ended up as a stinging sensation behind his eyes. He turned before Mr. Weasley saw it. Oh, thanks, he said as casually as he could. It is a long walk. He grabbed his sandwich and fled, and almost immediately bumped into Percy, dropping the sandwich he had not really even wanted in the grass. Sorry, Harry, Percy said. Having a good summer? Yeah, he said distractedly. His heart was beating rather fast, as if he had just spent time running. Are you all right? Oh, yes, I'm fine, Harry lied. Listen, I'm going to go back and find Ron. Percy regarded him, his eyes questioning behind the horn-rimmed glasses. See you at dinner, then, Harry, he finally said. Harry nodded, and Percy stepped around him to go into the shed. He entered, but did not shut the door all the way, leaving it open a crack. Harry stood rooted to the spot, staring at the door. He couldn't see Percy and Mr. Weasley. They couldn't see him, and Percy's voice drifted out, loud enough that he could hear every word. Did you say something to Harry, Dad? He looked a little upset when I saw him just now. Harry couldn't seem to leave. He didn't feel right about listening to a private conversation, but he couldn't force himself to turn away and go back to the kitchen or back up to Ron's room. But as much as he didn't want to listen, didn't want to hear, he wanted it just as much. Harry wanted something from me that I didn't feel comfortable giving him, Mr. Weasley said after a long pause. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but, Dad, he saved Ginny's life last year, Percy said. And I'm not stupid. I heard you and Mum talk about how awful you felt that you suspected him of hurting her and Ron. You shouldn't be listening to conversations that aren't meant for you, son, Mr. Weasley said firmly. Harry felt a jolt of guilt. I'm well aware that he saved Ginny's life, and I will be grateful for that until my dying day. But I don't expect you to understand until you have children of your own, Mr. Weasley said. But ever since they met and befriended Harry, your brother and sister have changed. In all fairness, they've changed in some good ways. They don't tease me, Percy said. Or if they do, it's not like the twins. Which is good, Mr. Weasley admitted. But in other ways, your mother overheard a conversation today that disturbed her very much. All three of them were laughing about torturing some Muggle woman. Harry's own aunt, I think. The children I raised would never speak so about Muggles. And I can only think that it is Harry's influence. The woman you're talking about, Percy said. His own aunt locked Harry in his room last year and put bars on his windows. They fed him through a cat flap, the twins said. I'm not saying that Harry doesn't have legitimate reasons, Mr. Weasley said. And it's partly because he has such good reasons to dislike Muggles that I distrust him. Harry closed his eyes. You distrust him because he's been neglected and abused. Percy asked in disbelief. I distrust what might come out of that abuse, Mr. Weasley said. Harry is not a normal 13-year-old. He's hard. I saw that at Pettigrew's trial. I'm aware that everyone knows what sort of filthy accusations that Umbridge woman made about both Harry and Ron, and, believe me, your mother and I were extremely angry. But Harry just looked at her, and he wanted to kill her. I would have wanted to kill her, too. There's a large difference between thinking you want to kill someone and actually wanting to do so, Mr. Weasley said. I think that Harry had to exert a lot of self-control to stop himself from doing it. And, as if that weren't enough, I saw the same look on Ron's face when they came back from saving Ginny from the chamber. My son looked at that Professor Lockhart with that same desire to kill, despite the fact that he did enough damage to him that he's still in St. Mungo's and just as ruthlessly reined it in. But, Dad, they both control themselves. They didn't kill Umbridge or Lockhart. That control is just as worrisome, Mr. Weasley said. Where did my impulsive son learn that kind of rage? And that kind of control? He learned it when he knew the kind of grief that leaves a man broken, Harry thought. He learned it when he saw almost his entire family slaughtered, and when he saw his wife burn alive. He learned at the same place he found within himself the kind of strength that allowed him to risk everything for the kind of love that burns brighter and hurts more than any anger. Harry's still only 13, Percy said stubbornly, and he's Ron's best friend. I still don't think that he has bad intentions, and he certainly hasn't done anything to deserve not being trusted. But if you're right, aren't you afraid that by rejecting him, you're going to make him harder? I'm not responsible for Harry, Mr. Weasley said calmly. I'm responsible for protecting my family. And if that means withholding trust until I have a better understanding of who he is, so be it. I don't dislike Harry, Percy. There may come a day when I trust Harry fully, and when I'm certain that he won't lead this family down a dangerous path. But there are so many examples of Death Eaters that liked what you-know-who told them, but when they saw what you-know-who was willing to do, they decided they didn't like it anymore. And when they tried to get out, he killed them. Harry hates you-know-who. He would never side with him. If Dumbledore has been right all these years, and you-know-who really isn't dead, Harry might be the best chance we've got, Percy said adamantly. Because of the terrible power, Mr. Weasley said. But what if the terrible power is just that? Terrible. What kind of price would the wizarding world have to pay? It's dangerous to give out that kind of trust freely, son. I made a choice to distance myself just a little, just in case. I hope I'm proven wrong. I really do. But if I'm right, Harry could not bear to listen any longer, and turned back to the burrow, and steeled himself for an evening of pretending to Ginny and Ron that everything was perfectly fine. The worst part of listening to the conversation that he was not meant to hear was that he understood, somehow, that made the pain worse. And for the very first time, Harry was eager to leave the burrow. Hermione, Harry called out in relief. He and Ginny were sitting at Florian Fortescue's enjoying an ice cream. Ginny had been asking him some very pointed questions for the last 10 minutes. So his happiness at seeing the bushy-haired, which was not simply because he had not seen her all summer. He intended to tell Ginny what had transpired between him and Mr. Weasley and the conversation he had overheard, just not in a place bustling with people. "Hi, Harry." "Hi, Ginny," she said. "Mom and Dad just left. I'm staying at the Leaky Cauldron with you guys tonight." Harry beamed. "That's great. Where's Ron?" Hermione asked before she even sat down. Harry and Ginny exchanged sly smiles. "What?" She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "What does that look mean?" "Someone has a birthday coming up," Ginny said. "We all went in on your gift, and Ron's managing it." "Oh," Hermione said. She looked pleased. "My mom and dad gave me some money, and I thought I'd—" "Harry, what's that?" "It's just a broomstick," Harry said casually, though he was grinning widely. "It's not just a broomstick," Ginny rolled her eyes. "It's a firebolt, Hermione. It's the fastest broom in the world, and Harry's just promised that I get to try it first." "I did I?" Harry asked. "You get to go before me?" Ginny smiled. "I heard you quite clearly." "I must have forgotten," Harry said. "Is it the broom all the boys were goggling at?" Hermione asked. "Mom, Dad, and I could hardly get through the crowd outside the Quidditch shop to get to Gringotts." "The very one," Harry said. "I thought I'd try out for the Quidditch team, so I needed my own broom." Hermione opened her mouth, probably to ask if Harry was sure he could afford to buy it, when Ron arrived, distracting them all. He carried what looked like a large bundle of ginger fur tucked under one of his arms like a quaffle, and a cat carrier and other supplies in the other. Crookshanks did not appear to be happy, from the way he was emitting a steady growl. "Sorry it took so long. I needed to explain a few things to Crookshanks here," Ron said, apparently not noticing Hermione. "You should have let Hermione do that," Ginny grinned. "It is her cat, after all." Hermione's eyes went round with shock. "You got me a cat?" she squeaked. Ron looked a little uncertain. "Well, we were going to get you an owl, but then we saw Crookshanks here, and we thought of you immediately. If you don't like him, don't be silly, Ron. He's perfect." Hermione opened her arms, and Crookshanks scrambled out of Ron's arms and on her lap. "What a good boy. You already know I'm yours, don't you, you smart boy?" Ron preened as though Hermione was talking about him. Harry saw Ginny's small smile out of the corner of his eye. Then he felt the light touch of her hand on his inner thigh, and suddenly all thoughts left his brain except the fact that he was exceptionally glad that he decided to wear wizard's robes instead of less concealing jeans. The rest of the day was so perfect and enjoyable that Harry almost forgot what had occurred at the Burrow. After deciding that they had shopped enough, even Hermione was eager to leave Flourish and Blots once she caught a glimpse of the Monster Book of Monsters. The bookseller had broken down in tears when he realized that they needed 3 of them. They returned to the Leaky Cauldron and Crookshanks. They played numerous games of Exploding Snap, and Harry was hard-pressed to decide who had more fun, the humans or the cat. The twins stopped by every 10 minutes to ogle his firebolt, and even Percy asked to have a go once they reached Hogwarts. Ron, mercifully, did not press Harry for answers, even in the relative privacy of the room they shared. Harry sighed, glad that he had one more day to put off telling them. Relief died a painful death when Ginny tiptoed into their room well after midnight. "Damn," Harry thought glumly. "They lulled me into a false sense of security." "What gives, Harry?" Ginny demanded, and, after turning on a lamp, plopped down on the bed, right on top of Harry's feet. He tried very hard to tear his mind away from the fact that Ginny was sitting on the bed he occupied. "We know something happened, mate," Ron said. "What gave me away?" Harry asked weakly. They both rolled their eyes. "First, you came back from the shed looking like death," Ron said. "And you weren't in there for that long," Ginny said. "I watched you from the window. You spent about half a minute actually inside, bumped into Percy, and then stood as still as a statue for about 10 minutes. Then you barely ate at dinner, even though you've always shown a mighty appreciation for Mum's cooking after you've spent time with the Muggles," Ron continued. "And you went up to bed at about 8 o'clock. After which you pretended to be asleep so Ron couldn't interrogate you," Ginny added. "So, basically everything you did yesterday and today showed us that something is very wrong." So Harry told them everything in excruciating detail. "Oh, Harry," Ginny said softly, "I guess we haven't been pretending as well as we thought we have." Ron asked. "I've been thinking today," Harry said hesitantly. "I don't think it's awful what your dad said. I understand a lot of it. I'm pretty sure that your family is going to trust me one day. I just wish it were today," they all said in unison. Ginny stayed as long as she dared as they sat in silence. But all too soon the comforting weight on his feet disappeared, and Ginny returned to the room she was sharing with Hermione. Harry tried determinedly to sleep after she left, but the rest he got was less than satisfactory. He dozed between fitful dreams that he could not remember, and from which he woke up feeling anxious. Tempers ran high the next day as everyone struggled to pack up their things and make it to the platform on time. They did not have the benefit of the ministry cars, although Harry saw it as a good thing that he did not have a supposedly deranged mass murderer after him. But that made him think of Sirius, so he found a spot and was squashed between Ron and an especially loud and excited George, who helped him take his mind off his errant godfather. They made it to King's Cross with about 15 minutes to get onto the platform without being seen by the Muggles, stow their luggage, and get on the train. Mr. Weasley illegally parked the car, cast a charm that would make Muggle policemen think it belonged there, and urged his children, Harry and Hermione, to hurry. "You two go first." Mrs. Weasley pointed at Ron and Harry. "I'm not risking the two of you not making it through the barrier again." Ron and Harry grinned, looked around furtively, and casually leaned up against the barrier. 30 seconds later, Ginny and Hermione joined them. "Come on," Ron said. "Let's get a compartment, and then go find Neville and Luna." They waded through the sea of parents hugging their children goodbye and issuing last-minute reminders, heading toward the back of the train. Harry and Ron lugged the trunks up and, staggering under the weight, placed them in a luggage rack overflowing with haphazardly placed trunks. Hermione, carrying a spitting and hissing Crookshanks, brushed her hair out of her eyes and went looking for an empty compartment. She poked her head around the corner. "I've found one. Finally, there's someone in it, but there's still room for all of us." "Let's say goodbye to Mum and Dad," Ginny suggested. "Let me get Crookshanks settled," Hermione said. They jumped off the train and found the older Weasleys with little time to spare. Ron and Ginny gave their parents fleeting hugs, and Harry and Hermione shook their hands. "Have a safe term, dears," Mrs. Weasley said. The whistle was already blowing by the time they reached their compartment, and the train lurched forward before they found their seats. All four sighed with relief, and Harry was glad to finally be on his way back to Hogwarts. He grinned over at the other occupant of the compartment. Remus Lupin, former marauder, was already asleep. "What's funny, Harry?" Hermione asked. "Oh," Harry said. He must be a professor, right? Malfoy and his mates won't try anything around us with him around. It'll keep us from getting detention before we even get there," Ron added. He peered at the small traveling case next to Remus' feet. "R.J. Lupin, where have I heard that name before?" Harry shrugged. "Sounds familiar to me, too." Remus twitched a little, and Harry wondered if he was feigning sleep. He said, in a louder voice, "I think it was at Pettigrew's trial." "Yeah," Ron said. "Dad mentioned that he wanted to hear what happened." "Do you reckon he knew Pettigrew or something?" Ginny asked. "If he did, he might know Sirius Black, Harry." Definite movement. "Did you hear from Sirius Black over your holiday, Harry?" Hermione asked. No, Harry was definitely speaking louder than normal, and Ron and Ginny struggled to hide their laughter. "I thought he was my godfather and my dad's best mate." "I've heard that Azkaban is really horrible," Hermione said seriously. "Yeah," Ron said. "Dad reckons it's the worst place he's ever been to." Just then, their game was halted due to the arrival of a harassed-looking Neville and a serene Luna. "We've been looking all over for you," Neville said. He looked around. He seemed perplexed when he noticed Remus. "I've never seen an adult on here before, except the cart lady and the driver. Reckon he's the new defense against the dark arts professor." "We were just thinking that," Ron said. "Hi, by the way. How was your summer?" "Wonderful," Luna said happily. "Daddy and I traveled all around Eastern Europe, looking for the famed popplewurm." Hermione opened her mouth, an annoyed gleam in her eyes, so Harry quickly asked, "Did you find any?" "No," Luna said, just as happily. "But it was such fun looking." Harry cocked his head and stared at her, momentarily stunned. That was the key to Luna, wasn't it? She was completely willing to ignore the facts and believe anything she wanted to. She fully appreciated and reveled in the fact that life was more of a journey or a quest It wasn't about being right or wrong with her. He didn't think he could ever live like that, but he felt a bit wistful all the same, especially when he knew. "Harry," Ron said loudly. His eyes brimmed with mischief. "I'm still wondering why Mr. Black," he snorted, unable to help himself, "hasn't contacted you yet." Harry shrugged. Maybe he and my dad weren't as good of mates as everyone said. "Perhaps you ought to give him some time." "Harry," Hermione said softly. "He might be having trouble getting used to the fact that everyone knows he's innocent. I mean, after Pettigrew attacked you three, I read up on everything. They didn't even give him a trial. Everyone just assumed that he was guilty, and no one spoke up for him." Remus Lupin made a sudden movement, as though pretending to be jerked awake. "Excuse me," he murmured. He stood and grabbed his worn traveling case, stepped over Ron's legs, which were stretched out so that he could put his feet up on the seat across from him, and stepped out of the compartment. "Oh," Hermione looked terribly guilty. "I hope we didn't. I suppose we were talking a bit loud." But Harry did not believe that Remus had been annoyed with chatter. He suspected that it had to do with the subject matter, and he remembered that Dumbledore had told him that Remus had refused to speak of Sirius at all. He watched Remus leave and was disturbed by the amount of pain and guilt on his face. He stared at the door for long moments, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Ginny patted his leg. Her hand lingered for just a moment longer than was strictly necessary for a friendly gesture, and his entire body erupted in goose flesh. He felt it acutely when her small fingers. She has small fingers because she's 12 years old, he told himself fiercely, caressed his thigh, and withdrew. Thankfully, a diversion in the form of Neville mentioning Lockhart served to distract him from what felt like intense physical pain that came in the form of desire. "What was that, Neville?" Harry asked. "I heard that Lockhart woke up." Neville looked slightly fearful of Harry's reaction. Ron had a dark look on his face and played moodily with his wand. Harry took Neville's expression to mean that he had not forgotten that Harry and Ron had almost killed their defense against the dark arts professor last term. "My gran, she, had business at St. Mungo's yesterday, and I overheard one of the healers talking about it with another witch." Harry could well guess what sort of business that Augusta Longbottom had at St. Mungo's. He assumed that she and Neville had gone to visit his parents, who had been tortured into insanity and now permanently resided in a ward for people who would never recover from spell damage before the start of the new school term. "That's a good thing," Hermione said firmly. "I'm sure that you're quite relieved, Ron, that you haven't caused permanent damage." "Yeah," Ron said. Harry heard the half-truth, though apparently Hermione was convinced because she smiled at Ron. Harry could not help but feel that perhaps it would have been for the best if Lockhart had remained at St. Mungo's with no recollection of what had happened outside the Chamber of Secrets, as he had last time. Neville met Harry's eyes and quickly looked away.
Thank you for being here, Potterheads. We are continuing on with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always by Dead Woodpecker, Chapter 14, The Nature of Fear.
Chapter 14, The Nature of Fear. Chapter text. Are we the only Gryffindors in this class? Ron looked around the ancient ruins classroom, aghast. Harry took note of the lack of red and gold accessories. There were 4 Ravenclaws, 2 Hufflepuffs, and 2 Slytherins. So, last time Hermione had taken this class, she'd been all alone. Terry Boot, Padma Patil, and 2 other Ravenclaw third-years girls that Harry did not recognize sat close together in a show of solidarity. Hannah Abbott and Susan Bones were directly in front of them. Blaise Zabini, Harry stifled a groan. Zabini was an annoying little git, and Daphne Greengrass, meanwhile, sat as far away from each other as possible. "Looks like it," Harry said. Neville decided to take divination. "An utterly useless class, if you ask me," Hermione said scathingly. "I'm sure this class will be much more interesting." Hermione looked at Harry oddly when, instead of joining the Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws to band together in an anti-Slytherin group, he sat across from Daphne. Harry still had some residual antipathy for most Slytherins. Most would fight with Voldemort, and a lot of them sold out students from other houses to do so, but Daphne was all right. "Hi," Harry said. You're Daphne Greengrass, right? She nodded and raised an eyebrow at him. That's me. What's your name again? Harold Porter. No, that's not it. Harvey. Ron laughed, and Daphne shot him a startled look. I'm Hermione Granger, Hermione said. And the laughing git is Ron Weasley. Do you really think I don't know who you are? Daphne asked, puzzled. Harvey here is famous, and we've had classes together since first year. Sorry for trying to be polite, Hermione said waspishly. Harry grinned at Ron over her head. He should have known that Hermione and Daphne would clash even more than Hermione and Luna did. Not that he had known Daphne well at all. He only really had vague memories of her. But by the time they had left school to hunt Horcruxes, Harry had known enough about her that the biting sarcasm came as no surprise. How she and Dean Thomas had ever fallen in love, Harry had no idea. They had both died before Dean could tell him, and Astoria had refused to talk about it. Daphne turned away from them with a roll of her eyes. A tall, broad man wearing long blue robes and a look reminiscent of Professor McGonagall entered the room, putting an end to any further discussion. Ancient runes, he said, is the study of a system of writing that is long dead, although it is rooted in the very first witches and wizards to live in Britain. My name, for those of you who do not know me, is Professor Octavius, and I am here to teach you the subtle intricacies of rune lore. Can anyone tell me why studying runes, even though many believe it to be a fanciful waste of time, is important? Hermione immediately raised her hand. Ancient runes are more connected with the source of our power, sir. Very good, he said approvingly. Anyone care to venture a guess as to why this is so? Hermione raised her hand again, but Padma Patil answered first. Is it because it has, I don't know, more pictures instead of symbols like the alphabet? Indeed, he said. Runes, like the hieroglyphs of the ancient Egyptian wizards, can be used to strengthen your own magic. Not because it will increase your power, I'm afraid, he said when he noticed that several students' faces brightened. It will, however, increase your focus. Students who have studied runes generally notice that their ability to master spells in other classes, especially charms and potions. This is because reading runes requires much more focus than simply reading. They can be very confusing, especially when we begin to read sentences and even ancient texts written in runes instead of English. That won't be for a while, however. Harry pulled his quill and several sheets of parchment out of his bag. He and Ron had chosen to take ancient runes instead of arithmancy because they most certainly did not want to take divination, and arithmancy sounded too much like maths. He had a feeling that ancient runes would not be as easy as they thought it would be. My head hurts, Ron moaned as they walked down to Hagrid's hut after lunch. He carried his copy of Monster Book of Monsters in a vice-like grip. It kept threatening to tear through the spellotape that bound it. I thought it was brilliant, Hermione said ecstatically. I can't wait until we actually start learning runes. Professor Octavius is such a good teacher, isn't he? You two ought to be glad you aren't taking divination. Professor Trelawney is the complete opposite. She reminds me a bit of Luna, although Luna isn't nearly as aggravating. Harry wondered if Hermione would ever tell them that she was using the time turner to attend so many classes. He and Ron had loitered outside the classroom for several minutes, so she could attend arithmancy. Neither had mentioned to Hermione that her disappearance had been noted. I liked it too, Harry said, surprised to find that it was true. It's not going to be as easy as I thought it would be, but I like the increased focus thing. Hermione turned her head this way and that, making sure that nobody was listening. Speaking of increased focus, are we still meeting in the room of requirement this year? She asked in a low voice. You're taking a lot of classes this year, Ron pointed out. More than me and Harry and the others. Anyway, do you think you'll be able to find time for it? Hermione was silent for a long minute as they trotted down the steep hill. I still think it's really important, she said. More important than homework? Ron asked slyly. Just as Hermione admitted. I'll find time for it. I got some interesting books in Egypt, Ron said, that have a lot of charm stuff in it. I don't understand half of it, but I reckon there are some books in the library that'll explain it. What kind of charms? Hermione asked curiously. I thought we were mainly focusing on defense against the dark arts, hexes and jinxes and stuff like that. Charms have got a lot of power, Ron said. Curse breakers use them, Bill says. In one of those Egyptian books, talked about how a lot of wars were won because they knew some good protection charms. Hermione sighed blissfully. I really love our study group. Ron and Harry grinned. I reckon we should explore Transfiguration, too, Ron said. I don't think we'll need herbology, though, Harry said. Tell that to Neville, Hermione said. Tell what to Neville? Neville asked. They had come up upon him without even noticing. We're branching out with our study group, Harry said in a low voice. Ron's going to try to find some good charms we can use. And I thought I'd focus a bit more energy on Transfiguration. His brows knit together. There are loads of useful plants, he said indignantly. You wouldn't believe the kinds of things you can do. I heard Uncle Algie talk about a plant that can even help you breathe underwater. All right, Ron said. You're in charge of the plant stuff. Neville grinned, but it slid from his face and was replaced with a look of pure horror. What on earth are those? The small paddock outside Hagrid's hut was now home to several hippogriffs of different colors. Harry thought they looked quite beautiful in a dangerous sort of way. His eyes fell on Buckbeak, who was flapping his wings agitatedly as he watched, with sharp eyes, the approach of more and more students. His beak, which was as sharp as his talons, clacked open and shut rather menacingly. Hippogriffs? Hermione said weakly. Hagrid brought hippogriffs? To his first lesson. Indeed he had, and by the way his chest was out and his face appeared to be about to split from his grin, Harry knew that Hagrid was quite pleased with himself. Gather round, everyone! Hagrid boomed, surrounded by third years. He seemed even taller than normal. We're working with hippogriffs today, and they can be tricky little blighters. Very proud. They are, and you got to bow them and treat 'em with respect, else they'll attack. Several students stepped back, including Neville. Harry gripped his arm and dragged him back. You were ready to fight a basilisk last year, Neville, and helped save the Philosopher's Stone our first year. What's a hippogriff compared to that? Neville swallowed, but remained where he was. Any volunteers? Hagrid asked. Harry stepped forward immediately. Good fare you, Harry. Now remember what I said about treating him with respect. Harry stepped toward Buckbeak and stopped before he came too close. Buckbeak regarded him imperiously, as though he were a king and Harry one of his subjects. Harry bowed low, maintaining eye contact. He thought of the last time he had seen the hippogriff. He had slashed the throat of one of the giants that had been fighting for Voldemort, and Harry felt real respect for the beast. It was still tense, however, when Buckbeak didn't bow for several moments. 5 minutes later, Harry was in the air, seated atop Buckbeak, and gazing down at the students below. He still preferred his broom. He planned to spend several hours with the Weasleys later this afternoon enjoying his new firebolt, but there was something definitely wonderful about Buckbeak and his strong, magnificent wings. Harry was reluctant to get off when Buckbeak made a jarring landing in front of Hagrid. Go on, Neville, Harry said. Ron was already bowing to a dun-colored hippogriff, and Hermione had followed him. Buckbeak isn't so bad, really. He can't be that scary, Malfoy said snidely, if Potter can do it. Longbottom might have to change his pants after this lesson, though. Draco Malfoy walked arrogantly toward Buckbeak, an ugly smirk on his face. Filthy beast, probably as stupid as our new professor. Harry was very tempted to let Malfoy get slashed, but Hagrid's job might be in jeopardy. Harry did not know if they would be able to arrange events so that Buckbeak would not be executed. He sighed and followed Malfoy, and broke into a run when Buckbeak reared up. His talons flashed in the sunlight. You fool, Harry said viciously, and he yanked Malfoy out of the way, sending him sprawling on the grass, just as a deadly sharp talon came down and sliced Harry's arm. Hermione screamed as Harry fell to the ground. Harry rolled over, gasping from the pain, used his right hand to try to staunch the alarmingly fast flow of blood. Through a haze of pain, Harry said, Hagrid, I think I need the hospital wing. Harry winced as his injured arm, still a bit sore from when he had pulled Malfoy away from Buckbeak's talons and had been slashed for his efforts, gave a painful throb. If Hagrid's job wouldn't have been in jeopardy, I would have let the slimy git suffer, he thought sourly. Buckbeak had ripped Harry's arm open from shoulder to elbow, causing him to spend a few nights in the hospital wing with a disapproving, hovering Madame Pomfrey. To add insult to injury, Harry had missed Quidditch trials and thus had to wait another 2 years before he could fly again. His dark mood had pushed him into skipping the Hogsmeade trip, for which Ron was very grateful, as he would have Hermione all to himself since Neville had detention with Snape that afternoon, and he had left Ginny with Luna, promising to meet her in an hour or so in the room of requirement. Now he stood just outside the door to the defense against the dark arts classroom and was feeling unaccountably nervous about initiating a conversation with Remus Lupin. "Harry." He turned and managed a weak smile. Remus had not been in his office after all, but had snuck up behind him, leaving Harry no alternative. "Hi, Professor," he said. "I thought you'd be in Hogsmeade," Remus said. Harry said. "My arm still hurts a little. I'll probably go next time." Remus smiled, but his eyes were questioning. He had to be wondering why Harry had been standing outside his door. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Harry said. Now that he was here, it suddenly did not seem like such a good idea. "I was wondering, I heard you had a lesson about a boggart. Ron and Hermione told me. You want to know what shape your fear takes?" Remus finished for him when Harry's voice trailed away. "That's very admirable, Harry, but wouldn't it show you Lord Voldemort?" Harry shook his head. "No," he said firmly. The boggart had shown him a Dementor the first time around. He'd be damned if he was more frightened of Voldemort than he was of fear. But a sneaking suspicion that the boggart would show him something different had prompted him to seek out Remus. Remus raised his eyebrows in surprise, though when he spoke, he did not mention it. "There is, in fact, another boggart. It was found in the dungeons this morning by Argus Filch, and I thought I would take care of it today, but I would be happy to allow you to do it instead." "Thanks, Professor," Harry said quietly. "The charm. It's ridiculous, isn't it?" "Yes," Remus said, "but you have to try to make what you fear funny. Laughter is the best way to defeat a boggart. They can't abide the sound. To be perfectly honest, Harry, if you had been in class the day we covered the boggart, I probably would not have wanted you to face it. I think what you fear is probably stronger and more terrifying than the other students, who do not have such horrors in their pasts as you do." They were sufficiently shocked by your friend Ron's. Ron had, in fact, told Harry this morning that he had had a nightmare just last night about what the boggart had shown him. It had been almost exactly what his mother had seen at Grimmauld Place. Dead Hermione, dead Ginny, dead family, a month later, and Ron's voice still shook when he mentioned it. "I noticed that you didn't fear my death," Harry had teased him when Ron had first confessed what had happened. "Because I'm not afraid of you dying," Ron had shrugged. "Killing curses don't seem to work on you." Severus Snape said, cutting into Harry's thoughts. He looked around and noticed, with a jolt of surprise, that they were already at the entrance to the stairs that led to the dungeons. Snape had stopped on the last stair, and he held a steaming mug of what Harry knew to be Wolfsbane potion. Professor Lupin and Potter, he put a hostile emphasis on Harry's last name. "What brings the two of you down here? Shouldn't you be with your little friends in Hogsmeade?" he asked Harry. "No," Harry said shortly. "My arm hurts. You know, because I saved one of your own stupid students from being mauled by a hippogriff." "Mind your tone, Potter," Snape said sleekly. Remus put a hand on Harry's shoulder, as though worried that things might escalate. "We're about to find a boggart, Professor Snape," he said courteously. Harry wanted to face one. "I have the potion you requested of me," Snape said, "but it will hold until after Potter shows us what the little chosen boy fears." Remus looked taken aback. "I don't think," Snape interrupted him, "unless you don't want this potion." "Harry, we can wait until later," Remus said, brows knit with worry. "It doesn't have to be public." Harry shrugged. "Maybe it'll show me Professor Snape in a dress, like Neville's did," Harry said. "I've regretted missing that since I heard about it. A long pink one, I think, with little roses on the collar." He did not particularly like the way that Snape had practically blackmailed Remus, so he quite enjoyed the look of anger on Snape's face. "Very well." Remus sighed after a moment. He had stepped in front of Harry as if to protect him from Snape's wrath, but Snape's mouth had merely twisted into a grimace, and he had not drawn his wand. Not that Harry had thought he would, but Remus had no idea that Snape had been an ally since Harry's second day at Hogwarts. They walked silently. Remus opened his mouth several times to speak. Harry noticed, but whatever the other man wished to say, he did not want to do so in front of Snape, who followed behind them like an overgrown bat. The trunk that held the boggart was in a small room that apparently was used for storage. It was halfway between the potions classroom and the entrance to the Slytherin common room, and the air inside was stuffy and was rather warmer than was typical in the dungeons. Harry immediately looked at the trunk that was partially obscured by a broken table laying on its side and a holy chintz lounge. It quivered a little. Harry stared at it with narrowed eyes. "What are you going to show me?" He asked it. "The ones I love lying dead on the floor? A Dementu?" He wondered if he might see the Weasleys, with angry faces and hatred pointed directly at him. He hoped he didn't. That would be very selfish of him. "Ready, Harry?" Remus asked easily. "Remember the charm?" "Yeah," Harry said. "Aloha Mora." Remus pointed his wand to the trunk, staying well behind Harry. It sprang open with a creaking groan and a squeal of rusted hinges. The boggart could not recreate the scene of Harry's worst fear, for which he was extremely grateful. Looking at himself, splattered with blood, and gore was bad enough without having to see everything else. The boggart had taken the form of Harry at his absolute worst moment, right before he had killed Voldemort. His own eyes glittered with rage and madness, and Harry realized why Arthur Weasley had been concerned about the look in Harry's eyes after Umbridge's insinuation. "I should have realized what my worst fear would be," Harry thought critically. "Of course it would be that the future is going to fall out the way it did, that I would be the last one standing." "Ridiculous," Harry said firmly. He did not waste time trying to find something funny. He didn't think that he could. Instead of the boggart Harry being put in witch's robes or growing an extra arm, there was a small pop indicating that he had successfully enchanted it, and Harry saw himself lying spread eagle on the floor, obviously dead. It felt like a promise. Remus shoved him aside before the fist that had wrapped around Harry's stomach had eased up a bit, enough to allow him to laugh. Boggart Harry disappeared, and a boggart moon hung low in the classroom, full and shiny yet ominous, because Harry knew what it represented. All three watched as the moon faded away, and the boggart was destroyed. Remus whirled around, drawing a shaky breath, and gripped Harry's arm tightly. "Harry," he said weakly, "that won't happen. You're a good person. I know you are, and you know it too. Don't let stupid suppositions make you believe otherwise." His words felt like a benediction, and Harry swallowed, feeling a great lump in his throat that had not been there moments before. Remus had guessed wrong about the boggart. He obviously thought that Harry was afraid that he would become something twisted and evil, another Voldemort. But Harry saw that the other man was perfectly sincere. He was not afraid of what Harry would become, not like the Weasleys. He had faith, and it eased a little of the hurt Harry had felt since Arthur Weasley had rebuffed him. "I know," Harry said finally. "It won't happen." He felt a sudden urge to tell Remus everything. He glanced over at Snape, who had said nothing since they had met. He was staring back at Harry with the strangest expression, and Harry could not possibly tell what Snape was thinking. Harry took a deep breath and opened his mouth. "Professor," Neville stood in the open doorway, white-faced and trembling. Though the other boy could just be nervous around Snape, Harry was certain that Neville had seen the boggart. This was confirmed when Neville's round eyes met Harry's. "Hi, Neville," Harry said. I wanted to fight a boggart since I missed that class." Neville tried to smile. "Please don't be afraid of me, Neville, please." "Mine wasn't as good as yours was," Harry said. "Isn't that right, Professor Snape?" Neville squeaked. "Try to set him at ease, Snape." Snape sighed, but Harry thought he was the only one who heard it. "I must admit that Potter has a point. However, just because it is flattering to be the worst nightmare of a 13-year-old boy, you still have detention. You will be disemboweling toads, Longbottom, and I am glad to see you did not bring gloves. You won't need them." "Good luck, Neville," Harry said sincerely. "It's not that bad, though, once you get past the slime and the smell." "See you at dinner, Harry," Neville said glumly. "Remember to take your potion, Lupin," Snape said as he swept past them. "I wouldn't like to see the consequences if you do not." After doing his admittedly small part in setting Neville at ease, Snape apparently had to reassert his nastiness by trying to torment Remus. Harry turned away to hide a smile, glad that some things never changed completely. The momentary urge to confess everything to Remus had passed. It was a big decision, and Ron and Ginny had every right to be a part of it. Not that Harry thought that they would disagree, but the three of them were in this together. With that in mind, Harry sighed. "Listen," Remus said. He held the smoking goblet in both hands as they turned to leave the dungeons. "I have to admit that what you saw concerns me. I did not wish to say this in front of Professor Snape, but—" Harry felt a sinking in his stomach. Did Remus decide not to trust him after all? "What frightens you most disturbs me. Harry, your father was one of my best friends at Hogwarts, and to think that you're burdened with something most 13-year-olds should never be burdened with. If you should ever feel the need to talk, Harry, my office door is always open." Something squeezed Harry's heart so tightly that it was hard for him to breathe. Remus had only known Harry for 1 month, and yet he was already willing to trust him. He was not afraid of getting too close to Harry, did not think that Harry was tainted. He pushed that thought out of his mind. "Thank you," Harry said finally. The walk from the dungeons to the entrance hall had never seemed shorter. "Ah," Remus said. He grimaced at the potion and then smiled at Harry. "I've got to get back to work, Harry. Just remember what I said." "I will," Harry promised. Then, when Remus turned to leave, "Professor Lupin, I'll definitely be coming to your office. Just not yet. Anytime." Harry went the opposite direction, heading straight for the room of requirement. He did not pay very much attention to his surroundings, but was replaying what had just happened in the dungeons. This was the first time that he had encountered a boggart, not counting the time he had seen Mrs. Weasley's worst fears at Grimmauld Place since his 4th year, during the final task in the Triwizard Tournament. He wondered when his own worst fear had shifted and suspected that it had after Sirius had died, when that loss had struck him like a physical blow. It had definitely happened by the time he fell in love with Ginny during his 6th year. While fearing fear itself was perhaps wise, as Remus had said during one of their first discussions, Harry could not stop himself from breaking out into a cold sweat when he thought of fate repeating itself. Not that it will, Harry told himself sternly. You know what to do now. His thoughts carried him to the door of the room of requirement. It was cracked open, and a pair of bright brown eyes peeked out at him. He smiled. "Hey, Bright Eyes," he said, stepping into the room. He looked around, expecting to see Luna, but realized, with a sinking sensation, that she was not there. He and Ginny were quite alone. He eyed her warily, and she responded with a slow, sly smile. He backed away from her, and her smile widened. "Hi, Harry," she said. "Air," Harry said, watching her walk over to a chair. It was big enough for two, barely. It sat in front of a roaring fire, and on top of a large rug that looked quite soft and even more comfortable than the chair. "Where's—" His voice cracked, and he cleared his throat. "Where's Luna?" She decided that she needed to write the essay we have due for potions, she replied. She was curled up on the chair like a cat. "We only have 2 more weeks to write it." Harry swallowed and, searching for a distraction, decided to warm his hands by the fire. He watched her out of the corner of his eye. He couldn't help himself, and she stared at him almost without blinking. She adjusted herself so that her long hair draped over the arm of the chair. Sweat beaded on his brow. "You're torturing me," Harry said hoarsely. She didn't even bother to deny it. "I'm enjoying myself immensely." Harry was too. "That note you left under my pillow. Seamus asked why I had to go wash again when I just had." She laughed. It was such an open and delighted sound that it made Harry want to kiss that laughing mouth. "You started it," Ginny pointed out. "Or did I just imagine what your Patronus said while I was having my bath the other night?" "That was after you did that thing you do," Harry said. "You know, your blazing look. The one I get when I'm thinking about how much I love you," she asked. "I can't help that." You, however, knew exactly what you were doing when you sent the message. "I almost drowned." "Me too," Harry said dryly. Without his volition, his feet brought him closer and closer to her, and he sat down with a sigh. She automatically curled up under his arm and placed her hand over Harry's heart. He played with strands of her hair, and it slipped through his fingers like silk. How many times had they sat like this? Too many to count. Usually it led to other things. But sometimes it hadn't, and on those occasions Harry had. He grinned when he noticed that a silver hairbrush had materialized out of nowhere. "Sit up, Bright Eyes, come on." She started to protest until she saw that he held the brush in one hand. She got up and sat down again on the rug and leaned against Harry's legs. She sighed with utter contentment as he gently pulled the brush through her hair. "You can keep doing that forever," she murmured. Harry finally stopped, and she leaned her head up against his leg. He reached over and laid his palm over one of the spots where he most liked to kiss Ginny, where her shoulder met her long, pretty neck. "Ginny," he said softly. He didn't want to ruin this moment, but as more time passed, he grew increasingly aware that there was a certain subject that they avoided, all three of them. He probably wanted to talk about it least of all, but it seemed irresponsible. "No, Harry," she said. "Not yet. Just not yet. We have to think about it soon," Harry pointed out. "Hopefully not for a while," she said. "If at all." "All right," Harry conceded. He was only too willing to put off the discussion about her parents, a discussion that they had never dreamed during the years of planning and painstakingly creating the potion that had required so much else of them. He remembered the vow he'd made in the kitchen at the Burrow and renewed it to himself. "Tell me about the sword again." She stiffened. Ginny's anger toward Lockhart had not abated one whit, and she fully understood how violated Harry still felt about being obliviated. Despite the fact that Harry had viewed those memories again and again in Dumbledore's pensieve, she never tired of telling it. Dumbledore had tried to reconstruct his memories, and whatever he had done had only worked a little. Harry no longer felt disoriented when they spoke of it, and sometimes he thought that a little wisp of memory had returned. But whenever he reached for it, it slipped away. The horrible holes in his mind were gone, but they were filled with mist and shadowy shapes, and not clarity. Lockhart, all evidence to the contrary, actually did have one good talent. Unfortunately, thinking about it made Harry want to kill him. Dumbledore had told him, regretfully, that if he forced it anymore, he was in danger of doing permanent damage. Harry, remembering what Voldemort had said about Bertha Jorkins being useless because he had broken through the memory charm that Mr. Crouch had placed on her, had reluctantly let it go. You didn't know that the sword was impregnated with basilisk venom until... But the appearance of Ron's Patronus interrupted her. It didn't say anything. Harry assumed that Ron did not want to risk them being in a public place, but it moved agitatedly. Harry watched it, fully alert, brain working very quickly. If Hogsmeade was being attacked, and he genuinely needed help, Ron would not have hesitated to make it speak. "What the hell?" Ginny said blankly. HPHPHPHPHPHPHPHPHP. Harry and Ginny returned to the Gryffindor common room immediately and waited for long, anxious minutes for Ron. Neville tried to distract them by telling them how horrible his detention had been and how he might vomit if he ever had to see the insides of a frog again. Ron finally entered through the portrait hole, Hermione following him. They both were white-faced with fury, and Ron held what looked like a magazine in a death grip. "Lockhart," he growled, and he threw the copy of the latest edition of Witch Weekly on Harry's lap. He sat down on an empty chair with a snarl. Harry was not sure that he wanted to read it. Ginny grabbed it. Ginny hissed when she saw the headline and began to read aloud. "Lockhart tells the truth about the Chamber of Secrets" by Raven Hubble. Witch Weekly is delighted to present to all loyal readers a new interview with our favorite wizard. He has just recovered from a horrible injury, which caused him to require several months of care at St. Mungo's, but he graciously agreed to the interview, especially as he has learned that he has won the annual Best Smile Award. "RH, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me today, Mr. Lockhart. Everyone at Witch Weekly, and all our readers, is thrilled that you've had a complete recovery. GL, I always enjoy getting in touch with my fans, Raven. And please call me Gilderoy. We've corresponded so often over the years that it seems silly for you to be so formal. RH, I see that your injuries haven't dimmed that smile one bit." "I'll think of that next time," Ron said darkly. "GL, thank you, my dear Raven. To be perfectly honest, my Order of Merlin, 3rd class, seems paltry compared to the honor of being so beloved by my fans at Witch Weekly. RH, you flatter us, Gilderoy. We merely appreciate your bravery and your good looks. Now, before I say this, You have the staunchest support of the rest of the writers at our humble publication. But there have been the most distressing rumors going around. GL. Ah, yes. One of the healers at St. Mungo's, a truly delightful witch, told me about them. RH. So you know that Harry Potter is claiming that you obliviated him? Claiming? Harry said loudly. He did, and I still haven't got all my memories back. We know, Harry, Neville said. I can't believe he's denying it. GL. I heard, yes. Utterly preposterous. I have never had the need to use a memory charm. Ron snorted. I'll bet that he's lied about half the stuff he's done and used a memory charm to cover his tracks. I wouldn't be at all surprised, Hermione said. RH, we thought so. So what had really happened in the Chamber of Secrets last year? GL, I don't remember very much of it. Only bits and pieces. RH, do you think that you were the one to be obliviated then? GL, I have no idea. The healers, they've alluded to certain things, but they claim not to be able to tell because the damage done to my brain was so vast. It may only be that the injuries I received caused this to happen. He's only saying that because he can't make a direct accusation without proof, Hermione said shrewdly. If he did, Harry, you could be put on trial. He doesn't want that, since the truth would have to come out. Harry nodded grimly. RH, that's awful, Gilderoy. If it distresses you, we could talk about other things. GL, no. My duty to my fans supersedes any discomfort I might feel, but I can only offer hazy memories. RH, not to worry. GL, it began when young Ginevra Weasley was taken down into the Chamber of Secrets. I had been working on the mystery all year, because as soon as Argus Filchcat was petrified, I knew exactly what that meant. I didn't alert the other teachers because I did not want them placed in unnecessary danger. RH, I'm sure they're very appreciative, Gilderoy. GL, so when Ginevra Weasley disappeared, I knew that I had to save her. Had to run away, you mean? Ginny said viciously. Bastard. RH, how did you run into Harry Potter? Then? GL, I met them, Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Neville Longbottom, just before I was about to enter. They demanded to come with me. They threatened to hex me if I did not allow it. RH, I'm surprised you didn't force them to stay behind. They ought to have known that only a powerful wizard like you could have been safe. GL, I'm afraid that they were quite overwrought about young Ginevra's predicament. I allowed them to come, knowing that I could easily handle the basilisk. I regret that now. I had no idea that they would turn on me once we entered the chamber. RH, it was Ronald Weasley that caused your injuries, was it not? He's lucky Ron didn't kill him, Neville said, not looking at either Ron or Harry. Yeah, he is, Ron agreed. GL, it was. I'm afraid that the young man became quite hysterical when we came upon the gigantic skin from the basilisk. I believe that he did not have any idea what he was doing. RH, you have a soft heart, Gilderoy. I wouldn't be half so understanding, and I'm sure our readers won't either. GL, I've always known that I am unusually brave. It seems arrogant to assume that others will be the same. I do not blame Ron Weasley, really. He was terrified. RH, will you be pressing charges? GL, no. Of course not. He's just a little boy. For a moment, Harry thought that a small tiger had entered the room with them. Ron was snarling. Crookshanks, who had settled on Hermione's lap just after Ginny started reading, watched Ron with an approving look. Ron, Hermione said, we talked about this on the way back from Hogsmeade, remember? You can't do anything about this, and anger won't help. It's making me feel better, Ron grumped. But when Hermione reached over and clasped his hand, the expression on his face immediately softened. Despite Harry's rather large desire to throttle Gilderoy Lockhart, he smiled. RH, he's a little boy that attacked you. Don't you want some sort of justice? GL, no. I managed to set it aside, and I hope you and everyone reading this will be able to as well. There was no lasting harm done. Soon enough, I'll be saving people from dangerous creatures once more. RH, oh, Gilderoy, you're such an inspiration. Do you remember anything more? GL, no. I immediately asked after the children upon waking up, though, and was immensely relieved that Ron Weasley's hysterics did not end in tragedy. RH, it disturbs me that Harry Potter falsely accused you of obliviating him. GL, as to that, I have no idea. I do not have any hard feelings for the boy. I often gave him advice in dealing with fame, as he does not have a father to turn to. But I will say that I've noticed certain tendencies for him to seek even more fame. He has quite a following of awestruck students, you know. He allows them to photograph him. Only when I can't avoid it. Harry said loudly. Stupid, lying arse. R.H. Gilderoy, I know it makes you uncomfortable to speak ill of anyone. But what if you were actually the one to save Ginevra Weasley from the basilisk? Do you think there's any possibility that he obliviated you in order to take credit for it? GL. I'm not certain, nor do I wish to be. It is enough for me that Miss Weasley is safe. But I will say this. It would be highly unusual, almost impossible, for such a young man to kill a basilisk and survive to tell the tale. But I will say no more of this. You can stop reading, Hermione said, although Harry noticed that the interview continued. They went on to talk about what hair products he uses. And put your wand away. Harry, Lockhart isn't here. No one at school is going to believe this, Neville said bracingly, once Ginny had ripped up the magazine and thrown the pieces into the fire. Lockhart is an idiot. He couldn't even handle Cornish pixies. Seen the interview, then? George asked. Fred was right behind him, and they had large bags full of Zonko's products and satisfied looks. We heard about it in the pub. Everyone's laughing about the idiot. They don't believe it? Harry asked. Fred smiled slyly. We might have had to set a few people straight. Mostly the older girls, though, who were blinded by his teeth. Ginny laughed. I can't believe what he's saying. You'll have a bit of trouble with the older witches, George advised Ron. They love Lockhart. Merlin knows why. But the other students remember how much of a stupid git he was. The next several hours were spent roundly abusing their former defense against the dark arts professor. Harry could not even bring himself to worry about it, although Ron had already claimed that he was going to check his mail very carefully to ensure that some love-struck, middle-aged, which wouldn't try to curse him. Ron was absolutely delighted to find himself the center of attention during dinner. He was asked repeatedly to describe stunning Lockhart, and when he told them that he had snapped the professor's wand, everyone within earshot applauded. McGonagall, who was passing by at that point, had to cover her mouth to hide her smile. Harry got out of the shower later that night. He could still hear people roaring with laughter down in the common room, and he was certain that they were still discussing Lockhart, and found Neville sitting on his bed. He was obviously waiting for Harry. What's up, Neville? Harry asked. Air, Neville said, and then muttered something under his breath that Harry could not hear. The other boy looked desperately uncomfortable. What? Harry asked as he pulled on his pajamas. He stared at Neville until he looked up. Neville took a deep breath. No, I know that you have a secret. Neville, don't deny it, Neville said firmly. Don't worry. I'm not. I trust you. I don't think you're a madman. But I know you and Ron are hiding something, and I think Ginny is too. Damn. Harry had absolutely no idea what to say. He flattened his hair. Listen, Neville, you're right. But you're going to tell me, Neville said glumly. You don't trust me? I trust you, Harry told him. I do. Please believe that. Then why? Harry thought back to his very first year, the real one, when he had known very little about anything. He just faced Voldemort for the first time, and he had asked Dumbledore for the truth. What was it that he had said? Neville, someone once told me that sometimes we aren't ready for the truth. It can be a burden. Is it about the prophecy? In a way, Harry said honestly. Are you preparing us for something? Neville licked his lips. Is that why we're practicing so much? Yes, Harry said. Listen, Neville, if you don't want to, I'd understand. You don't have to, keep coming with us to the room of requirement. Neville turned away, and Harry began to fear that he would say that he could not live with Harry keeping secrets from him. He'd have to talk to Ron and Ginny, but maybe it wouldn't hurt if Neville and Hermione, because they couldn't tell Neville and not tell her, knew a little sooner. But Harry did not want to place that burden on the other boy's shoulders just yet, nor did he want Neville to stop learning the skills that would help him survive. My parents, Neville said softly. Harry started. They were tortured by you-know-who's followers right after you made him disappear. Harry sat on the edge of his bed. I'm pretty sure. No, I know that we're learning all this stuff because of you-know-who, Neville continued. So even if you can't tell me, I'm going to keep learning because of my parents. I want to fight too if he comes back. When? Harry said quietly. When he comes back. Neville nodded. I thought he might. My gran told me that Dumbledore told her that it was only a matter of time. The silence lasted for so long that Harry assumed that Neville was done talking. Suddenly exhausted, he climbed under his covers and set his glasses on the top of his closed trunk. He yawned, wondering if he would be plagued by nightmares due to the encounter with the boggart, and raised his wand to close the bed hangings. Harry squinted at the Neville-shaped blur. Yeah. Are you ever going to tell me? Yep, Harry said. Count on it.
Thank you for being with us, Harry Potter fans. We are continuing on with Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker, Chapter 15, And It All Falls Apart.
Chapter 15, And It All Falls Apart. Chapter text. Harry looked up at the burrow with something that felt suspiciously like dread. He had not wanted to join the Weasleys for Christmas almost as much as he did want to come. He'd come very close to signing up to stay at Hogwarts. Perhaps he could have assisted Dumbledore with the ongoing and apparently futile search for Sirius. But he had thought of spending Christmas away from Ginny for the first time since he was 17 years old, and how miserable that would be, and decided to accept the invitation. Give me a hand over here, mate, Ron said. You know I can't carry a trunk like this. There had been a flurry of cursed mail that had winged its way toward Ron in the months after Gilderoy Lockhart's interview. He'd managed to dodge most of them, had in fact taken to burning any mail sent from unknown senders to the raucous applause of spectators. But he'd been caught unawares this morning, and his hands were covered with blisters. They smelled quite awful, too. Sorry. Harry grabbed the handle of Ron's trunk and pulled it toward the house. The combined weight of his and Ron's trunks forced him to pause every 5 feet to catch his breath. He and Ron were pretty much alone. The twins had not even brought their trunks home with them, but had stuffed 2 large bags they'd filched from Mr. Filch full of clothes and gifts. Mr. Weasley had carried Ginny's trunk in for her. Harry rubbed his back and was grateful that he hadn't brought Hedwig with him. That cage would just be one more thing to carry. Let me help, Percy said. He stepped off the back porch, neatly avoiding the Wellington boots. Hands okay, Ron? Yeah, Ron muttered. Stupid witch. You should have gone to Madame Pomfrey, Percy said pompously. She could have fixed him up for you. Didn't want to miss the train, Ron said. I'm sure Mum has something that'll work for this. Mum's a bit annoyed with Dad, Percy warned. I wouldn't risk asking her for anything right now. I told him that he ought not to have flown the car. It was late afternoon. Mr. Weasley had enduring much pleading and cajoling from his children to fly the car home. He had eventually given in, and they were home much earlier than they would have done. Mrs. Weasley had obviously been able to put 2 and 2 together. Indeed, Harry could hear her yelling as soon as he stepped closer to the door. I can't believe you flew that car. Honestly, what were you thinking? You're supposed to set an example for the children. Molly, dear, Mr. Weasley said soothingly. It was perfectly all right. No one saw us. The invisibility booster worked just fine. That is not the point. Harry followed Ron into the house, but when Ron stopped to ask his mother to cure his hands, Harry decided that it was a good time to leave Ron behind. Once Mrs. Weasley's temper was riled, Ron stumped in the attic room not 10 minutes later. His hands looked just as painful as before. Mum was quite nasty about it. Said that I ought not to have opened a letter from a stranger. She's not going to fix them? Harry asked in disbelief. She is, Ron said. She said she'd be up in a few minutes. I reckon she wants to finish yelling at Dad first. I wish she'd done it before I had to go to the loo, though. Harry grimaced. He couldn't even imagine how awful that experience must have been. She's right, you know. You knew that you shouldn't have opened it. Thanks, Ron said, his voice laced with sarcasm. I hadn't figured that out yet. Anytime. The ghoul that lived above Ron's room apparently did not like the sound of their voices, for they heard loud banging. Ron had to speak loudly over the noise. Listen, Harry, he said. I reckon we should kill Lockhart. Ron, Harry hissed, sitting up. Not here. No one's listening, he said. You worry too much. I think Lockhart's going to screw everything up. I know you don't like the fact that you've been getting hate mail. Ron shook his head. It's not about that. He's very popular, you know. And once things start to really happen, I reckon he'll make trouble for us. You really think we should kill him? Harry asked. Or at least put him in the permanent spell damage ward, Ron said. He's a threat to our plans, Harry. I know it. He almost effed everything up last year, almost ruined everything we're trying to do, and I don't like the idea of letting him try again. Harry remembered a time when neither one of them would consider this. He eyed Ron very carefully. Ron was sincere, that was certain. But it was also clear that he did not like the idea, for which Harry was very grateful. He stood up after several minutes of silence. I'm going to go talk to Ginny, he said. I'll tell her to meet us up here tonight, after everyone's asleep. And then we'll ask Dumbledore if he can think of a way to do this without, you know. Ron looked relieved. Harry noted the open door ruefully. They were going to have to be a lot less complacent. Just because their plan had, thus far, worked, they still had quite a lot of road to travel, and it was dangerous to discuss it casually. He walked swiftly down the stairs. He heard Mrs. Weasley yell, "Arthur," at the top of her lungs, followed by a resounding thud. She was still at it then. Mr. Weasley ought to ask the twins about how to head off her anger. He grinned. He knocked on Ginny's door and pushed it open, and he caught her in a state of undress that made his mouth go instantly dry. Cover your eyes, cover your eyes, cover your eyes, he told himself. But his traitorous hands did not obey him. She was wearing everything but a shirt, and he could not take his eyes off her simple white bra. Harry, Ginny said pleasantly. Shut the door. He obeyed immediately. You're getting your Christmas present a little early, she said ruefully. Your mom and dad. Mum's too busy fighting, she waved her arm, and Harry gulped. You need to put on your shirt, he said hoarsely. He found himself suddenly sitting on her bed. Why would I do that, she asked. I've been trying to think of how I'd orchestrate this. And here, Ginny, we can't do this, he said, and then she let her bra slip to the ground, and all thoughts suddenly flew out of Harry's head. He grabbed her pants and pulled her closer so that she stood between his legs. He stroked her arms, and then her back, and then he brought one hand around her front, and she gasped. She leaned forward and pressed a kiss on his mouth, and whispered in his ear, You don't get to have all the fun. And for one thrilling second, Ginny's hand was on him, and it was the best feeling in the world. Bang! The door crashed against the opposite wall, and Mrs. Weasley stood there, Mr. Weasley right behind her, and for a horrible moment there was only silence. Ginny screamed and dove for a shirt. Get away from my daughter. Mom, no, Ginny yelled. It isn't. But Mrs. Weasley drew her wand and silenced her daughter. Trembling with rage, she opened her mouth and closed it again, and Harry could see that Mrs. Weasley completely despised him. It was Mr. Weasley that spoke the words that caused a pain so sharp that Harry could hardly breathe. You need to leave. Get out of the burrow. Harry did not know when he had decided not to go back to Hogwarts, but it must have been sometime during the long walk down the stairs, past the dumbfounded twins and Percy, and down the snowy drive. He only knew that when the night bus appeared and Stan Shunpike asked his destination, he opened his mouth and said Godric's Hollow instead of Hogsmeade. How could he possibly face Dumbledore now? And Snape? His stomach felt hollow, and there was a rushing sound in his ears, and he could still hear Ginny screaming at her parents that it was her fault. She'd made him touch her. The shouting had followed him from the burrow, which had been his most favorite place in the entire world besides Hogwarts, and from which he had just been exiled. Stan was speaking to him, but Harry could not summon the effort to reply. Which house in Godric's Hollow? Stan said loudly. By the peeved expression on his face, Harry realized that Stan had asked this several times. I don't know, Harry said, and it seemed wrong that he had no idea which street his parents had lived on. The one with the gaping hole in it. Harry gritted his teeth. You know, where Voldemort murdered my entire family. Think you can find that? Stan did not say anything else, but left Harry alone with the guilt that had started to fester. Here we are, he said, when the night bus jerked to a halt and Harry was thrown off his seat. Thanks, he muttered, and dragged his trunk out with him. Stan and Ern wasted no time in leaving, and within seconds, Harry was alone on the street. He dropped the end of the trunk he carried and stared at the cottage. It filled his vision completely, and he could not help but remember seeing the memories of that night through Voldemort's point of view. Voldemort had stood right here and had watched Harry's father entertaining his son with puffs of smoke. Harry's mother had come in, had taken Harry to his nursery to put him to bed. It took several moments for Harry to realize that the clicking noise came from grinding his jaws tightly together. A hatred for Voldemort that was as vast and as deep as the sea rose up inside him. His fault. Everything. The emotion sustained him and propelled him past the sign that sprung up and into the cold, empty cottage. I don't care how cold it is, Harry told himself fiercely. He considered lighting a fire in the hearth, but the last thing he wanted to do was get hauled up in front of the Ministry of Magic for underage magic. Harry scowled at his wand and threw it aside. It rolled under one of the musty, moldy couches that nobody had bothered to clear out. As Harry did not imagine that he could feel any worse, he set out to explore, feeling a sense of increasing disbelief that not only had the wizarding world made a monument out of a house where his mother and father had died, but they had left everything exactly the way it had been. The pram was still by the stairs, there were dishes in the sink, and cans of food in the damn pantry. "I'm surprised they didn't leave your bodies here for me to discover," Harry said. His voice was unnaturally loud. "I wish I had the resurrection stone so I could show you this travesty. The monument to the bloody boy who lived. But oh, I forgot. That particular Deathly Hallow doesn't work anymore, which means that I get to die." He kicked the pram and sent it crashing into the wall. He stomped up the stairs. As soon as he reached the top, a draft of icy air hit him and rage crashed over him all over again. How could they leave it like this? The door to the nursery, where Voldemort had murdered his mother and had been blasted into half-death, was open. Snow was falling onto piles of broken, rotting furniture. Harry did not know how long he stood there. Long enough that his hair and shoulders were covered in the flakes of snow that was falling steadily, and long enough for Harry's rage to leave him exhausted. He felt dangerously on the verge of tears, and he missed the anger that served as a buffer to the guilt and grief. He crossed the hall and found his parents' bedroom. It was relatively intact, but it smelled musty and old, and he knew that he would not sleep here, could not bear the thought of sleeping in this room. He dragged the old comforter off the bed. He grudgingly admitted that he could use the warmth and brought it downstairs to the small sitting room where he had placed his trunk. He threw himself down on the couch and pulled the comforter over his head. He was staring at the darkness, thoughts a-whirl, when he noticed that the dark had lightened by a degree. It was not until he heard Ginny's voice that he sat up straight and threw the cover off. Her Patronus, a silver doe that was the mate to his stag, stood before him. "Harry, I'm so sorry. Mum's screaming at Ron. Don't reply. I love you." The heartbreak he heard in her voice suddenly drained him of all energy, and he fell back onto the couch, sending up another cloud of dust as it disappeared. "Don't feel guilty, Ginny. It was my fault as much as yours." He willed her to hear him, somehow, and, pressing the heels of his hands hard against his eyes to somehow hold the tears in, he fell into a deep and, for once, dreamless sleep. Over the next few days, Harry developed a steady routine of wallowing in misery, shaking with rage, and scavenging through his parents' pantry for things that he could eat. He had not even picked up his wand from where he had dropped it. Not even just that morning when Dumbledore's Phoenix Patronus had found him. "Heard that you left the burrow. No details. Where are you?" it had said before fading away like Ginny's. But the last person that Harry wanted to talk to was Dumbledore. If he talked to Dumbledore, he'd have to talk to Snape, and he could not bear the thought of how humiliating it would be to tell them that he had broken off all ties with the elder Weasleys because he had touched their daughter. A small voice in the back of his head that sounded like Hermione told him that he was being completely irresponsible and irrational. Harry got rather good at ignoring it. Finally, he had to leave the house. He grabbed his invisibility cloak and a small bag of wizard money. Money was money, and most shop owners would be pleased to be paid with real gold. At least that's how he justified it. Hermione did it, Harry told himself. The sky was leaden with clouds, and Harry was certain that it would snow again this evening. He tried to remember whether it was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, but he couldn't be sure. He was fairly certain that he had slept through Christmas. He remembered waking up to the sound of drunken carolers, but the happy revelry made him think of the burrow and how much he wanted to be there, so he'd gone back to sleep again. He walked down the quiet street and was glad that no one was out and about. He hadn't washed in what? For days? 5? He couldn't remember. He hoped that Dumbledore would not send him another message. They'd been coming in increasing frequency, and he did not want to deal with muggles being frightened by a talking, misty phoenix. He found a small corner store and randomly grabbed muggle snacks and stuffed them in his robes. He left a few galleons on the shelves. He wandered over to the refrigerators, thinking that he ought to get a few bottles of water. He'd found the well in his parents' backyard, but Harry thought it might not be as clean as he would have hoped. He scanned the beverages, and he was about to grab for some water when something caught his eye. Why not? I haven't got anything better to do. 10 seconds later, he walked out of the store clutching a bottle of whiskey. It wasn't exactly fire whiskey, but Harry knew it would get the job done. In one hand, bags of chips in the other, and had 4 big packets of beef jerky stuffed down his pants. Life, he thought resentfully, does not get much better than this. It had taken him and Hermione ages to find his parents' graves last time, and even though that had been over a decade ago, Harry's feet took him unerringly to the spot. He brushed the snow off the tombstones and wished that he had thought to liberate flowers from the corner store as well. He let his snacks fall to the ground. "Hey, Mom." "Hey, Dad," he said. He opened the bottle of whiskey and took a deep pull from it. It burned down his throat and hit his belly like a stunner. He gasped. "I wish you could tell me why I screw everything up," Harry said. He felt the back of his eyes sting with tears and knew that they weren't there because of the whiskey. He took another drink then. Because he didn't want his parents to think that he didn't know how to share, he poured a little over their grave. I try, and it's never fucking good enough." He forced his jaw to unclench. "Sorry about that, Mom. You probably don't like to hear me swear." Harry thought about the resurrection stone again. "I wish I could really talk to you. Dad, you could probably tell me everything I'm doing wrong, and you'd probably help me fix it." Harry turned around quickly. He thought he had just heard movement among the tombstones. He narrowed his eyes and scanned the cemetery. It appeared empty, but last time, he and Hermione had been spied upon by Voldemort's snake, Nagini. When he was satisfied that no one was there, he swallowed another mouthful of whiskey. He was already feeling pleasantly warm, Harry was pleased to note. "Dad," he said forcefully, "you could also help me with your best mate. You know, Sirius Black? My supposed godfather, who has been out of Azkaban for almost an entire year and hasn't once stopped in for a chat." Thinking of Sirius made the ache in his heart, which he knew would not go away no matter how much liquor he consumed, grow stronger. He glared at the bottle in his hand for a little while and realized that the invisibility cloak had fallen off of him. He pulled it up over himself again, looking around warily. He moved closer and traced the outlines of their names and birth dates. He lingered over the etched date of death, October 31st, 1981, the day that Harry's life had changed forever, when the first part of the prophecy had been enacted and he had been marked for death. "I miss you," he said, and he did not like how his voice sounded so much like a child's. "I'm so sorry, I wish I could have." But he could not choke the words out. How could he tell his parents that he had gone back to save everyone else but them? "The last enemy that shall be defeated is death," Harry said softly. He brushed away the tears that were now falling freely down his face. "I think I understand that a little better now." Harry bent over and picked up the snacks he had left strewn on the ground. "I'll come back," he promised. "Maybe I'll bring Ginny, too. And Ron. Although he might hate me, too, for effing everything up." He wandered back to the cottage, in no particular hurry. Every once in a while, he stopped to take another sip of whiskey. Night had fallen while he had spent time at his parents' graves, and the air had an ominous feeling to it that meant that it would begin to snow at any moment. No sooner had he entered the privacy of the cottage, and he immediately suspected that Dumbledore knew where he was and had been watching him, than the Phoenix Patronus, which was becoming all too familiar a sight, appeared. "Harry Potter, come to Hogwarts at once." Guess he hasn't been watching me, Harry thought. The messages had become increasingly angry and worried. Dumbledore apparently still did not know what had happened, as just 2 days before he said that he had received a disturbing message from the Weasleys. Harry could guess what it was. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley did not want to allow contact between Harry and Ginny. He flopped down on the couch, opened a bag of chips, and popped a handful into his mouth. He washed it down with whiskey. He slowed down the drinking for a while and stared into the empty hearth, his mood becoming steadily darker. He wished he could go back in time to just before Mrs. Weasley had barged through the door and demanded that he get away from her daughter. By the time the snow had stopped and the moon had fully risen, Harry had begun seriously drinking again. It didn't help the gaping wound in his chest. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the rage and hatred on Mrs. Weasley's face, and he could hear the chill in Mr. Weasley's voice echoing in his head. "Get out of the burrow! Get out! Get out! Get out! You aren't welcome here." Why hadn't Ginny sent another message to him? Why was it only Dumbledore sending the messages? He knew with absolute certainty that Ginny was not angry with him. Ron, now, was probably furious. But Ginny couldn't be. "Where are you, Ginny?" he asked when the silence became too much to bear, and he had to hear the sound of someone's voice. Things became a bit fuzzy after that. Harry rose to his feet after hours of sitting, and had to catch himself to keep from falling over. He took another drink and noticed, with some surprise, that the bottle only had about a third left. "I need my wand," he thought, despite the fact that he had not picked it up since the first night he was here. He set the bottle very carefully on the floor, knelt down, and reached under the couch. It took him several tries to find it, and several tries to get up again with the bottle in one hand and his wand in the other. He stood uncertainly in the middle of the sitting room. Which way should he go? The front or the back? He decided to go out the front door because it was much closer, and he was fairly certain that his legs would carry him there. He managed, though he had to push himself off the walls at times. The colder air felt good on his flushed body. He pitched forward as he crossed the threshold, and he almost dropped his bottle. "Don't do that, Harry," he said out loud. "That would be stupid." He closed the door, propped himself up against it, and took another swig. He looked up at the stars. Have they always moved like that? And felt another surge of anger. "Hey, stars," he said, "got any effing prophecies for me tonight? I could use another one." He squinted at them, but it made him feel queasy to watch them move around like that. His gaze fell upon the spot where, if he moved close to it, the sign would appear. He stumbled down the path toward it. It rose up, just as he had known it would, and he leaned up against it. He felt a lump in his throat, and took another pull from the bottle to stop the tears. Everything crashed down on him. The look on Mrs. Weasley's face, the things Mr. Weasley had said, the conversation he had overheard, that damn article that Umbridge wrote, the fact that he had lost his surrogate family, and the closest thing he had a parent since he was 1 year old. "I want a sweater," he said, "but I'm never going to get one, never, never, never." He squinted at the sign and could not help but notice that there were far fewer messages, and all of them were old. People probably don't want to support the future Dark Lord, Harry thought bitterly. His sudden rage choked him. He lifted his wand, fully intending to blast the sign away and damn the consequences, but the shuffle of feet distracted him. "Is that you? Voldemort, you evil son of a bitch!" Harry shouted. The small part of his mind that wasn't completely drunk told him he was acting like a lunatic. Voldemort was still in Albania, and he wouldn't return to England for another 6 months. But that part of him was tiny and became smaller still when he took another drink. "Come out. Try to kill me, you bastard. I hate you." The footsteps paused, and he heard a swift intake of breath. "That's right," Harry continued. He then swore loudly and incoherently for what felt like several hours, but he could not seem to stop himself. "Finish the job," he said finally. Lights were starting to come on in the neighboring houses, but he didn't care if the muggles heard him. If Voldemort killed him now, the Ministry could deal with obliviating them. "Or are you still a coward?" There was a bang, and his voice cut off abruptly. He was still shouting, but he could not hear sound. Was Voldemort trying to stop him from cursing him? His chest swelled with outrage, and he wanted to kill him, but he couldn't seem to move. He dropped his bottle, and it shattered, spraying his shoes and the hem of his robes with whiskey. He felt himself wavering, and put his hand out to catch himself on the sign, but it wasn't where he put it, and he pitched sideways. Strong arms caught him before he fell over, and suddenly he was ushered forward, stumbling more than walking, away from the cottage and down the street. "My wand," he tried to say, but no words came out. "Keep walking, Harry, it's all right." The voice was low and sounded familiar, but it wasn't Voldemort. Voldemort had a high voice, and he would never, ever help Harry walk anywhere. Maybe it was Mr. Weasley. He might have decided to forgive Harry, but no, Mr. Weasley hated him now. "It's not all right," Harry wanted to say. In what seemed like no time at all, whoever it was that helped Harry stay upright was banging on the door to another cottage. It opened immediately. Heard him shouting. Had to silence him. The Muggles heard him too. Was about to go over there myself, but then I saw you. Harry tried to keep track of what they were saying, but it took too much effort, and he only registered snatches of the conversation. Someone small grabbed his arm, and it was flung over frail shoulders. Wherever he was, it was very dark. Didn't know anyone had the courage to talk about Voldemort like that. I couldn't help but let him go on a bit. "Do you think he's mad like some people say?" "No," Harry said, and was glad to find that his vocal cords were working again. "I'm not mad." "He's not mad," that familiar voice said. Harry wished he weren't quite so drunk. Maybe he could place it if he were sober. "He's drunk." He was guzzling a bottle of whiskey, and it was almost empty, and I suspect he's in quite a lot of pain. He visited Lily's and James' graves today. Harry opened his eyes and realized that the room was brightly lit and spinning quite a lot, and it only seemed dark because he had forgotten that he'd squeezed them shut. He still could not tell who was talking about him. Someone had removed his glasses. Glasses? Harry slurred. Someone put them back on his face. A very old woman was staring at him. She looked a little familiar. "Get away from me, Nagini." "What the?" Harry stopped. The man grabbed him, pinning his arms to his side. Harry stared at Bathilda Bagshot, and then realized that she probably didn't have a great snake inside her neck yet. "Sorry, Mrs. Bagshot." He turned his head with much effort and came face to face with a man he knew very well indeed. "Padfoot," he said in an anguished voice. "Where have you been?" And then he started to cry, and he did not know whether the tears came from the large amount of liquor he had consumed, or whether he was just so happy to see Sirius Black again, who had arrived just when Harry had needed him most, when he had felt like everyone he cared about the most had turned their backs on him. "I needed you," Harry said. "Why didn't you find me sooner?" "I didn't know if you'd want me to find you." "Harry," Sirius said. "Don't be stupid," he said. "You're my godfather." And that was the last thing he remembered before he passed out. Harry dropped Sirius' arm and leaned away to vomit in the street, and not on his godfather. "I hate apparition. Operating with a hangover is not fun, is it?" Sirius said, too cheerfully. Harry was desperately grateful to have found his godfather again, but he spoke too loud, and he was too damn happy. "I'm not hung over," Harry said weakly. "Still drunk then?" "Sirius," Harry said, "if you have any mercy at all, you would take me to the nearest place that sells hangover remedies. I'd even try Muggle ones, I swear." "Oh no," Sirius said. "You got to learn this lesson the hard way." "Where'd you learn that one?" "Voldemort," Harry asked. "I'm suffering here." "Actually, it was your grandfather," Sirius told him. "James and I had to learn this the hard way. And so do you. And judging how livid Dumbledore's Patronus sounded, I thought it best to take you straight to Hogwarts." Harry had awoken that morning by Sirius prodding him and telling him that he needed to wash quickly and that they were going to Hogwarts. The sun had poked him hard in the eyes, and even the sound of rushing water had been far too much for his sensitive ears. When he'd finally emerged from Bathilda Bagshot's small bathroom, Sirius had thrust a cup of tea at him, handed him his wand, bewitched the trunk he had retrieved from Harry's parents' house to make it fit in his pocket, and had taken him to Hogsmeade. "Hand me my invisibility cloak, please," Harry said. When Sirius eyed him suspiciously, he evidently thought that Harry was a flight risk. He added, "Do you really think that I want McGonagall or the other professors to see me like this? I won't run." "You've apparently been hiding from Dumbledore," Sirius pointed out. "And judging by the mess you made at your parents' house, you've been successful at it for a while." "I'm not the only one who's been hiding from Dumbledore," Harry accused. "You've been missing for almost a year. I had no idea that you wanted to see me so badly," Sirius said quietly. I've lived with the fact that I basically killed your mother and father. No, you didn't, Harry said so sharply that his head throbbed. He winced. Pettigrew betrayed my parents. And besides, you'll know soon enough, Harry said darkly. It's me that needs your forgiveness. Trust me. The walk from Hogsmeade to Hogwarts was long and slow and very painful. The entrance hall was pleasantly dark, and Harry sighed with relief. The weak winter sun had been far too bright. It was empty and quiet, though not for long, as Harry heard footsteps. He turned and saw the only person he wanted to run into, Remus Lupin. He stopped halfway down the stairs and stared through Harry, as he was invisible, at Sirius. The silence swelled, and Remus made a convulsive movement, as if he were about to run. Harry did not understand why Remus dreaded seeing Sirius, but he had to do something. He pulled off the cloak enough to reveal his head. Don't you dare run away. Harry, Remus all but shouted. Where have you been? The whole castle's been worried. Are you ill? You look very unwell. If you call being half drunk and half hungover ill, Sirius said. Remus narrowed his eyes. You let a 13-year-old get drunk? Sirius held up his hands. Don't blame me. He did it all by himself. I was only there for the end of it, when he was calling Voldemort some very nasty names. Remus looked bewildered. I'm coming to your office now, Harry said carefully. He had that horrible feeling in the back of his throat, like he was going to be sick again. Remus said. You know, Harry said, I need to talk to you. And Sirius. You're going to see Dumbledore, Sirius said firmly. We can talk to Remus later. That's what I meant, Harry said. Remus, I need to talk to you. It's okay if we do it in Dumbledore's office. It's probably for the best. Remus raised his eyebrows at the familiar address, but Harry didn't care. He pulled the cloak back over his head. Can one of you levitate me to Dumbledore's office? What did I tell you about learning your lesson? Sirius asked, but he was grinning as he drew his wand. Just this once, and only because we'll get there faster. Harry suspected that he dozed off a little, because one moment he was reveling in the sensation that he was resting on some giant bed of air, and the next they were halfway to Dumbledore's office. The silence was so thick that he suspected that it would take a rather large severing charm to cut it. Why weren't they embracing each other like brothers? The Marauders, not counting that bastard Wormtail, had once been as close of friends as Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Luna. Will you help me make my own Marauders map? Harry asked suddenly. You know about the Marauders map? Remus asked with great surprise. Did you tell him about it, Sirius? No, Sirius said slowly. He called me Padfoot as soon as he saw me, too. Harry did not want to start this conversation on the stairs, so he ignored their stares, and he didn't say anything. Instead, he groaned. Dumbledore is going to be very angry with me. Going to be? Sirius said. I think that Professor Dumbledore will be relieved to see that you are safe, Remus said at the same time. Albus is very angry with Harry, Sirius told him. He sent a message to Harry this morning that rattled the windows in old Bathilda Bagshot's cottage. Harry, why didn't you come back to Hogwarts? Remus asked. I didn't want to. Apparently Remus could not argue with that, for he said nothing further. And all too soon they were standing in front of the gargoyle that guarded the headmaster's private office. Lemon drops, Remus said firmly. It sprung away. It took some maneuvering to get Harry down again, and he ended up rapping his hand sharply against the stone wall. Ouch! Sorry, Sirius said. You might want to take that cloak off now. Harry did not want to lose the protection that the cloak offered just yet. Dumbledore might have another professor in there. Remus rapped sharply on the door, and at Dumbledore's enter, he pushed it open. Harry sidled in behind him. Sirius slid in behind Harry. It appeared that he also did not want to see Dumbledore. Harry felt a lump in his throat that was not entirely due to the fact that the moving stairs had nearly made him vomit again. Remus, Sirius? Dumbledore sounded surprised. Where in Merlin's name have you been? Sirius said. I've been around. Harry remained silent. I'm not being a coward, he assured himself. I just don't want Dumbledore to see me like this. I expect your godson will be quite pleased to see you, Dumbledore said pleasantly. Although it remains to be seen if you will return to this school. He went missing almost 2 weeks ago. He did seem pleased to see me, in fact, Sirius said. There was a lot of pain in his voice. If he still believed that Harry should hate him for what Wormtail did, Harry was going to throttle him. Sirius reached over and pulled Harry's invisibility cloak off. There was a stunned silence. Harry looked at the ground. He looked at the portraits. He looked at the hearth. He looked anywhere but at Dumbledore. The room spun, and he closed his eyes. His stomach rolled. "Basin," he said weakly, and he sat down on a chair. "Harry," Sirius said, shoving the bucket he'd conjured between Harry's knees, "learned the danger of drinking large amounts of whiskey last night." There was movement and a whooshing sound, and Dumbledore called into the flue, "Severus, Harry's here." There was a pause, then Sirius Black as well. "Bring one of your hangover potions, please." "Severus Snape?" Sirius said incredulously. "What's he doing here?" "He is the potions master," Dumbledore said. "And our ally." "Sirius," Harry murmured. "Snape is a friend." "He is," Dumbledore confirmed. "Please try not to let him antagonize you too much. We need the both of you." Sirius remained silent. Severus appeared moments later, gripping a small bottle, the likes of which Harry had been longing to see all morning. "This is the best I could find, Dumbledore." Harry could feel Snape staring at him, so he studied at the bottom of the bucket very carefully. "I would like to know," Sirius reached over and clasped Harry's shoulder, "why my godson felt the need to get blind, stinking drunk last night." "Your godson," Snape said smoothly. Harry groaned. "You haven't tried to contact Potter all year. Don't tell me that you were expecting me to show up too." "Everyone wanted you to show up," Harry said as firmly as he could. "Snape, the remedy. I'm begging you. Should I withhold it until we get some answers?" Snape asked Dumbledore. "I got kicked out of the burrow," Harry said sullenly. "We know," Snape said. "The burrow?" Sirius asked. "Two of Harry's best friends live there," Remus murmured. "Harry was supposed to spend the Christmas holidays with them, but he left." "I was told that I wasn't wanted there anymore," Harry said. "After I tell us what happened, and you get to drink this." Snape waved the bottle near his face. "Go on, Harry," Sirius said. Harry looked between the two of them, stunned. "Do you have any idea how strange it is to hear the two of you agreeing on anything?" "Don't plan on it happening again," Snape said. "And stop stalling." Harry licked his lips. Ginny, she wanted to give me an early, Christmas present." The implications of that were not lost on the other four. "Ginny's only 12 years old, Harry," Remus said quietly, but Harry could hear the reproach quite clearly. Harry flushed. "That was very dangerous of you to let that happen at the burrow," Dumbledore said. "But I expect you already know that." "It was very wrong of him to let it happen anywhere," Remus said solidly. "She's very, very young. Sex at that age." "We didn't," Harry said loudly. "We didn't have sex. I swear it was only in her shirt. And she had her hand. Then Mrs. Weasley caught us, and Mr. Weasley told me to get out, and that I was no longer welcome at the burrow." Snape thrust the bottle into his hand. Harry stared at it a moment, opened it, and drained it. His head immediately began to clear. He desperately hated the fact that something that should have been very private, and just between him and Ginny, was being paraded out in front of basically everyone he cared about. "I just couldn't help it," Harry said helplessly. "You said that you were going to wait until she was 14, Dumbledore said. "But if you absolutely couldn't wait, couldn't you have exchanged gifts while you were still here?" "Why would Harry tell you when he was going to have sex?" Sirius asked, confused. Remus sputtered. "What is going on here? Are you actually saying that you would permit Harry and Ginny to have sex?" "Ginny isn't even a teenager, and Harry just barely is. Harry and Ginny are a special case, as I assume you will know momentarily," Dumbledore said. "I assume that you want them to know?" "Yes," Harry said. Dumbledore got up from behind his desk again and opened the cupboard door. He brought out the pensieve and placed it down carefully. He siphoned off the memories that already swirled and put them into several glass bottles. Harry felt a pang of guilt when he realized that Dumbledore had probably been searching his memories, trying to find Harry. "I'm sorry," Harry said. "I couldn't face coming back here." "Where were you, incidentally?" Snape asked. "He'd been living in James and Lily's house," Sirius said. Remus knit his brows. "But doesn't it still have a hole in it where... I didn't care, Harry said. He didn't care about much of anything last night. Sirius informed the rest. When I found him, he was screaming obscenities at me. He thought I was Voldemort. And when I took him to Bathilda Bagshot's, her house was closer than the house I bought. He got a good look at her and screamed something about Nagini and jumped at her. Snape snorted. It was an honest mistake, Harry said defensively. I was drunk and confused. What did Bathilda say? Dumbledore asked. If this got out. She won't say anything, Sirius said. I asked her not to, and she's always been fond of Harry. Harry's stomach clenched. The Weasleys were supposed to be fond of me too, he said through gritted teeth. And look how that's just turned out. He tried to force the bitterness away, but it choked him. Harry, if you did touch their daughter. I love her, Harry shouted. And they didn't even trust me before that. Arthur Weasley didn't want to be tainted by me. He said so last summer. He stood up and placed his wand to his temple. Harry, no. Remus and Sirius shouted at once. I'm not going to do myself in, Harry said. You need to see my memories. Sirius, he turned toward the other man. Before you see this, I'm begging you to forgive me. It was my fault that you spent an extra year and a half in Azkaban. And I know it was terrible. But please. Harry looked away. He did not think he could bear it if Sirius turned his back on him as well. He didn't think he could do this without him. He wasn't even sure that he could do it without the Weasleys. Long streams of memories the color of molten silver flowed from his temple to his wand. When he was satisfied that he had enough to explain what was going on, he swirled it in the pensieve. He'd added a few more memories than he had planned, mainly for Sirius' benefit, to show him how sorry he really was. This is going to take you a while, Harry said, but we'll be right here. I'm sure you'll have questions. Remus and Sirius looked at him for a long time, then stepped forward at the same time and fell into Harry's memories of the future.